Hello. How is everyone doing? Another episode of WNBA Social. I'm your host, Sean Holko, and joining me for my second episode is a friend of mine, a part of the Hoop Social family, the Hoop Social Media Network, none other than Mr. Trey Hill. Trey, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you joining me. It's taken a while for me to get this second episode going, and that's completely on my own fault. But I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to have you alongside me to talk some WNBA because, man, this season has been great so far, and just the quality of basketball that we're seeing, I'm really excited about.
Oh, yeah, I 100% agree. I've only been watching the last few years, but even you can tell the difference just between now and like 4 years ago, whenever I first started watching and paying attention. The game just continues to level up, and the play right now is just I think it's an all-time high, and I just I love that the season's been extended a little bit, that it's getting to be a little bit longer, and I'm glad to see the level of play matching the attention it's starting to get.
Yeah, I completely agree because for years you've seen NBA players support the league, and a lot of people have said like, oh, they're just supporting because they want to support the women's league. But no, they are supporting it because it's damn good basketball that we're seeing. Obviously, in every professional sport, in any sport in general, you're going to see moments of sloppy play. And for years, I feel like with the W, people have just picked like that 15 seconds out of a 40-minute game and been like, see, this is what the product is, when in reality, it could just be one transition.
Shacked in a fool before Shacked in a fool was a thing.
Exactly. And so I'm just glad that the WNBA is starting to get the recognition and the respect that they deserve, because I was tuned into the Storm and Liberty game yesterday on CBS. And, man, the beginning of that game, it just felt like every single play that the Liberty made was just a brilliant play, like not just easy buckets. Like Breanna Stewart started the game with a fadeaway. Then Sabrina, they swung the ball around, finally gets kicked out to Sabrina. She nails a three. Maureen Johannes was doing her thing. And I just love what I'm seeing. And the New York Liberty, they came out angry yesterday against the Seattle Storm. And that has a lot to do with what happened on Thursday night when the Liberty took on the Las Vegas Aces for the first time. And Trey, as we saw, the Aces, they handled them quite easily.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to see the Liberty Storm game, but I did see most of the Liberty Aces game, or at least the parts that mattered. And handled them was the correct term. It really seemed like the difference was like watching a team that was a well-oiled machine versus a team that it was kind of clunky. It was I know that's not very technical, but it was just like the Liberty had everything took them a half second longer than it took the Aces to do, and the Aces just took advantage of it.
Yeah, without a doubt. And we're definitely seeing that early in this season because things were rough for the Liberty the first couple of games because you just put all this talent together and you didn't really have much time to let them get in sync. And we really saw the growing pains in the first couple games. They play some lesser opponents. They start to get their footing under them. But then we saw exactly what happened when they went up against the heavyweight of the WNBA. And that's no disrespect to the Connecticut Sun, because the Connecticut Sun and the Liberty have had a lot of great games too. But to me, it just seems like the Aces are on another level right now. What about you?
Well, the Aces net rating, they have the best one in the league, obviously. It's plus 19.4. The Liberty are second at plus 8.5. So they are 11 points better in net rating than the number 2 team, it's unheard of in basketball. So for me, that kind of shows the dominance in the stats, but just watching I messaged you skill versus will with the Liberty and the Aces. And so for me, it's more skill versus skill, but the Aces, they use their willpower to just break you down. Whereas the Liberty, it seems like they depend on that 3-point shot so much. And the Aces, they just grind you into dust every game. Well, like their defense, it swarms. Everyone can pass. The playmaking is incredible. We've seen some of the best passes ever already from players on the Aces this year. Chelsea Gray had that one that was just incredible. And the way they play is it's such beautiful basketball. And I think that's the thing I took away from watching the Aces and the Liberty, that well-oiled machine. It's so perfectly ran. It's great basketball.
It truly is, and that's a great point that you made about just the fact that the Liberty, they seem to rely on the 3-ball a little bit too much versus you look at the Aces, like you said, the Aces grind you away, and then if Asia Wilson is so deep down in the post or Candace Parker, and then they see an open shooter out on the wing, oh, you have a Jackie Young, former number 1 overall pick, is like your 3rd or 4th or 5th option on this team, which is unfathomable. And then you also have Kelsey Plum out there on the wing just waiting for their opportunity. You usually kick out, you get buckets. And we saw Kelsey Plum really go off in that game against the Liberty. And I just wanted to mention a couple of stats that I saw from that game in which the Aces defeated the Liberty 98-81, 17-point difference on the scoreboard, but it was really not even that close in this game. And that's the unfortunate thing for a lot of us who were greatly looking forward to this first matchup between the super teams. But, you know, like you said, it was a well-oiled machine with chemistry versus a team that's still trying to find it, as the Aces are the 3rd team in WNBA history to start a season 14-1, along with the 2016 Los Angeles Sparks and the 1998 Houston Comets. And just speaking on the one loss that the Aces have had since the last time I recorded my first episode of WNBA Social with my friend Sam Peppelman, Sam and I, we were speculating, man, could the Aces like really realistically go undefeated for who knows how long? And I decided to be a pessimist. I decided to be a hater. And I was like, I'm going to say that they lose a game coming up in June. I saw that they had a back-to-back in Connecticut. The Aces absolutely handled the Sun in that first game in Connecticut. But the second game, June 8th, and I remember that vividly in my mind because I just called my shot and I was like, second time back-to-back in Connecticut. They'll make adjustments. The Sun are going to get an upset win, which they actually did. But other than that, the Aces have been absolutely tearing this league up, as they have 8 consecutive home wins to start the season, which is currently the 3rd most in WNBA history, right behind the Houston Comets, who did repeat after having 10 home wins in a row to start the season, and the Sparks, who had 9. But the Sparks did not repeat the year that they did that. So it'll be interesting to see if the Aces are able to repeat.
One more thing about the Aces, and you mentioned Jackie Young. Aaliyah Boston is leading the league in field goal percentage, and that's been a thing that's been talked about a lot this last week or so. And I kind of went to look at true shooting. Right now, do me a favor. Guess what Jackie Young is shooting for her true shooting percentage?
Shit. Let's go with 64%.
69.5.
Whoo, man, I thought I was overestimating. That's crazy.
Not possible.
I don't even know.
You see the shots she takes. It's not like she's a center, just dunking every. Like, I'd have to go and look and see what Steph Curry was at in his that apex. But someone that shoots the shots that she does, having that high of a true shooting percentage, I think that's getting a little overlooked in everything else that the Aces are doing, because there is so much success to go around with that team.
Yeah, I completely agree, because if you look at a player like Jackie Young, she would be the number 1 option on many other teams in the W, probably among the 12. Okay, she's not the number 1 option on the Aces. Probably wouldn't be the number 1 option on the Liberty either, because they do have some player named Brianna Stewart and a couple other great players. And then you look at Connecticut, they have Alyssa Thomas, who has been just putting up triple doubles nonstop this season, and deservedly so. She's a WNBA All-Star starter, but I think probably on 9 to 8 other teams, Jackie Young would be the number one, if not number 2 option on a team. I mean, you did mention Aaliyah Boston in Indiana. Maybe Aaliyah as a rookie would hold it down still as that number 1 option. But Jackie Young, like, is she having, I mean, let me rephrase the question. Is she being used to her fullest potential on the Aces? Because yes, obviously it makes it so much easier for her having all of that talent around her. But I feel like her game could expand even more, but she's kind of just put in that box of playing her role, and she does it excellently. But I feel like she could flourish much more if she was on a different team.
I mean, she could definitely flourish more, but I think she's getting to maximize her role. Yeah, she could go somewhere else. Like, she could go to Indiana and be the 1A or the 1B. But to me, I mentioned earlier how well the Aces run. And if you take Jackie Young out of that, that takes so much away from them that I don't want to take away from her talents just to kind of shoehorn her into this 1A role. The role she's in now, it's great for her. And with the talent coming into the league, I think it's going to be really easy for a number 3 option like her to affect the game like a number 1 option, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does without a doubt. And just speaking about another South Carolina player that you mentioned earlier in Aaliyah Boston, in her first 10 games of her WNBA career, she scored over 150 points with over 70 rebounds on 50% from the field. And she joined this list of great players: Chiney Ogwumike, Tina Charles, Natalie Williams, and my favorite on this list, none other than Yolanda Griffith from the Sacramento Monarchs. This isn't officially the Monarchs Minute, but man, Aaliyah Boston joining that list with a Hall of Famer and Yolanda Griffith, that's pretty damn good.
Did you find that stat just so you could bring up the Sacramento Monarchs?
You may already know me pretty well, Trey, if you're already hypothesizing that.
I mean, she's played unreal. I know she had a really poor game against Chicago the other night, and I thought Chicago did a really good job of denying her access to the ball. Once she got the ball, she was pretty effective, but they did a really good job of just forcing her to give it up, or mostly not even letting her get it at all. And Kelsey Mitchell did an all right job, but for me, everything just has to run through her. And if she can get the ball early in a possession, she makes the right decision every time.
Yeah, she does without a doubt. And shout out to Kelsey Mitchell, first-time All-Star out of the Ohio State University. I apologize, Trey. The more that you get to know me, the more you'll hear me just emphasize the Ohio State University, because that's where my grandpa went. But just catching up on some of the things that I missed in the last month is we got to see dueling 35-point games between Jewell Loyd of the Seattle Storm, Arike Ogunbowale of the Dallas Wings, as back on June 17th, you had Arike drop 41 points, Jewell Loyd dropped 39 points, and they joined this list of players in WNBA history to have 35 points at least against each other, as Aerial Powers and Sophie Cunningham. That's not a duo that I expected to see on this list when I initially saw it, but you have Aerial Powers, Sophie Cunningham, shout out to Soph. Then, and that was last year. Then takes it all the way back to 2010, where Sylvia Fowles and the GOAT Diana Taurasi did it. And then back in 2006 as well, as Diana Taurasi and Tina Thompson did it as well. And so the point in bringing up that stat is you look at a team like Seattle, and Jewell is doing everything she possibly can to get that team just a win. And the thing that I found most interesting about tuning into yesterday's Storm and Liberty game is obviously it was in Seattle. And so on a national network like CBS, they had the Seattle broadcasters calling the game. And the Seattle broadcasters brought up a great point that when Seattle plays anyone other than like the top 3 in the WNBA, being the Aces, the Liberty, and the Sun, they are extremely competitive in all of their games this season, where the point differential in each game is under 10. But when they play those top 3 teams, they're not even close. And so you see someone like Jewell Loyd, who she can only do so much. But then you see someone in Arike Agubawale, and she could be playing the hero ball that Jewel Lloyd has been. But Arike now has another emerging star on her team in a Satu Sabali and a not so shabby third option in Natasha Howard, who just came over from the New York Liberty this year. And when I recorded my first episode with Sam Peppelman, I was really super high on the Wings as a potential team to upset one of these super teams in the Aces and the Liberty. But for some reason, the Wings, they've struggled this season with inconsistency. I thought that they would be a lot better to this point. And so do you see the Wings as a potential real threat with that core of those three players being Agubawale, Sabali, and also Howard, and also they just recently brought back Tierra McCowan. So how much are you a believer in the Dallas Wings?
Very little. I've been on a big playmaking kick the last year and a half or so. You got to be able to move the ball, make a decision within a half second or so. And while the Wings have a lot of talent, they even have a lot of scoring talent. The ball doesn't seem to pop for me as much as I'd like when I've watched them. And I've only seen, I think, 3 games of theirs at this point. So I haven't seen a lot of them. But when I have watched, it's been a lot of ISO ball. It's been a lot of, catch, survey, and not just any one player, but just as a general rule. So for me, when I've watched the Wings, how do you say her name, the one that's emerging now?
Satu Sabali.
She's really stood out. The 2 games I've watched, I've really liked what I've seen from her. But again, it's when you see those top 3 teams, and really it's the Liberty and the Aces is really where I'm looking with Jones going out for the Sun. I think that's just going to be really hard to overcome as talented as Alyssa Thomas and the rest of that team is. So for me, I'm looking at the Liberty and the Aces, and I cannot see the Wings finding, like, maybe the Liberty, I could see them giving them a series, especially because they depend so much on the 3-point shot. If you have a couple games where you go cold, that's all it takes. But other than that, I don't believe in them as much as you do.
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm starting to rethink that position just a little bit. Just within this last month, letting things settle in a little bit more. I don't know how I feel about the Wings as much. I mean, I still think that they'll make the playoffs, but that's not really saying too much.
Well, since we said big 3, what do you think about the Mystics? Do you think they've got the best defense in the league right now according to defensive rating, and they've got EDD on the offensive end. So for me, that's a formula for success in a playoff setting.
I do really like the Mystics, and the Mystics are the team that gave the New York Liberty their first loss of the season, and they did it in convincing fashion, albeit it was in DC. Also, since we're talking about DC, shout out to Bobby, also a part of the Hoop Social family. But they beat them in the first game. I wasn't so convinced because, like we talked about earlier, but I see there's Mountain Dew as well. I love Mountain Dew as well. But I wasn't so much convinced based on the first game just because it was so early. And like we talked about, even just with what we just saw this past week with the Aces and the Liberty are still building their chemistry. But what I saw from the Mystics, it was like a couple weeks ago where the Mystics played in New York against the Liberty, and it was on ABC. They got up by 17 points, and they were absolutely dominating. But that game changed when Shakira Austin got hurt, and she went out in, I think it was the late 3rd quarter, maybe early 4th quarter. That game ultimately went to overtime. The Liberty ended up winning the game, and they became the 5th team in the WNBA this season to win a game after trailing by more than 15 points. Going into that game, teams that trailed by more than 15 points going in had a record of 4-45 this season. So the Liberty became the 5th team to overcome such a deficit. And so you mentioned the Mystics with that defense. They can also really let it go. But to me, Shakira Austin is the anchor. And Shakira Austin was the difference, and she probably will be the difference going forward. If Shakira Austin can continue to play like she did, especially against Jonquel Jones and Brianna Stewart, then the Mystics, they could potentially be that team to really contend with the 2 super teams. Because as you mentioned, Brianna Jones, of the Connecticut Sun. She went down with an Achilles tendon rupture. She is going to be out for the remainder of this season, which is really unfortunate for the Sun and their chances.
Yeah, Austin's injury, I think she's going to be out at least another 2 weeks, if I have the timeline correct. But it was, 2 weeks, they can live with that. I'm really thinking playoff time. And so for me, if I have to pick a team other than the Liberty or the Aces, I'm probably picking the Mystics. And that's a lot of that is just the respect for EDD.
Didn't realize that I had myself muted, but Elena Deladon, she did say earlier in the season when it was some road game, I can't remember where it was, but a Washington D.C. based reporter asked her after the game. They were just like, "You're in the paint and you're in the post, and you are just constantly getting hacked, and you're not getting that respect, and you're not getting those foul calls." And Elena basically just said as much. She just says, "I want my damn respect. I've been in this league for years. I've been an all-star for years. When am I going to get my respect?" And I think she fully deserves that respect because she's an established star. And so I'm really keeping my eye on the Mystics, but I don't know. At this point, we'll get to them a little bit later, but at this point, Trey, I don't know if anyone is going to stop the Las Vegas Aces because they already have.
No.
Yeah, exactly. That's the fun thing about this season, and to be honest, I did think that the Liberty would get their chemistry a little bit faster. But I will say, yes, they were pissed off after Thursday's loss in Vegas, and it was a lopsided loss. But I really was encouraged by what I saw from the Liberty against the Storm because they really looked like they had the chemistry. Something about their play early in the game when they got out to a big lead against Seattle is that they were really moving the ball, and they were playing that fluid basketball that we would hope and expect them to. But to me, Jonquel Jones is the X factor because I know that not a lot of people watch the WNBA, and the point of this podcast is to get more people to watch the WNBA, but also just making comparisons between the W and, as Ari Chambers likes to say, the MNBA. Just a comparison between the two. This Liberty team really feels like the Miami Heat from 2010 to 2014 in the sense that Chris Bosh was never a league MVP like Jonquel Jones was in 2021. But Jonquel Jones has taken a huge step back since joining the New York Liberty. And that's going to happen when you go from being the number one option to being the number 3 option. But to me, when Jonquel has stepped up and she's gotten her double-doubles, whether it be 10 points and 10 rebounds or whatever, that is when the New York Liberty are at their best. And that's something that Shakira Austin was able to limit in that game between the Mystics and the Liberty before she ended up getting hurt. And so Jonquel Jones, to me, is really the X factor when it comes to this Liberty team. And it really gives me Chris Bosh vibes.
I agree that she's the X factor because Sabrina's going to be able to get hers from the 3-point line. They love to shoot. They shoot more threes than any other team in the league. I went and looked. So Sabrina's going to be able to get hers. And Stewie is so good that even if you have JJ focused on, like, you have her as the number one, quote, quote, number one option while we're crossing leagues, Breanna Stewart's like Durant. She's going to get her 25 points, and you might not even realize it. And, you notice when she gets 40, but she's going to get 25, and you're not even going to know. So I think Liberty, for them to have their best success, it's going to have to be with Jones. And I brought up the Aces earlier. The one place that you can beat up on them is size down low, I think. Again, the Fever have played them really well this year. I think that's a lot to do with Leah Boston being so dominant down there in the post. And if you can get Jones going down there and forcing the Aces to have to be reactive instead of active on the defensive end, that's a win for the Liberty that I think they're going to desperately need.
For sure. And you spoke about Aaliyah Boston. I got one more Aaliyah Boston stat for you, and I promise this isn't Sacramento Monarchs related. As Aaliyah Boston, she was selected as an all-star starter. She is the 8th rookie selected to start in the all-star game ever, in the first since 2014. So she's doing something that hasn't happened in nearly 10 years. So Trey, let's talk about those WNBA All-Stars because we had, I think, just about over a week since the starters have been revealed, and the starters have a lot to do with Las Vegas as 3 Aces, they headline the 10 starters for the WNBA All-Star Game, as you have Asia Wilson, Jackie Young, and Chelsea Gray. Shout out to Chelsea Gray, 209 in Stockton here in California. It's very hot here in California right now. So everyone else who isn't in California, I hope you're enjoying your weather because we're out here melting. But anyways, shout out to Chelsea Gray. Then you got 2 players from the Dallas Wings. You got Arike Agubawale and also Satu Sabali. 1 player from New York on the starters being Brianna Stewart, Brittany Griner from Phoenix, Leah Boston, as was mentioned, Jewel Lloyd from Seattle, and Nneka Ogwumike from the LA Sparks. So obviously, those are all great players, but do you think someone stood out? Because I mistakenly said earlier that Alyssa Thomas was a starter. She probably should have been a starter, and that's probably why my brain just grouped her in there with the starters, because of what she's been doing this year. She could have been deserving. But to you, among those 10 players, did anyone get snubbed from being a starter?
Oh, yeah, it's definitely Alyssa Thomas. She's an MVP candidate, in my opinion. So the idea that she wasn't able to get a starter spot while being one of my favorite, if I had to fill out a ballot, she's going to be on the top 5 for sure. That would be the easy snub for me. What about you? Did you have what other than that one? What did you have any complaints?
It was a player that we were talking about just about 5 minutes ago, EDD, Elena Delle Donne, because the Mystics, they have gotten to this point of potentially being the number 1 contender to these 2 super teams. And a lot of it has had to do with Elena Delle Donne. And this is the first year in a while, at least that I can remember, where she is consistently staying healthy. And I'll just knock on my wooden desk that my computer and mic is sitting on right now, because I have Elena Delle Donne on one of my fantasy teams. And regardless of that, she's a great player and I love watching her play. I don't want to see her get injured. And so to me, if I had to pick someone other than Alyssa Thomas, I'd probably say Elena Delle Donne stands out the most to me. But if I had my choice just for one player to be a starter, it would be Alyssa Thomas, just with you. But Trey, the caveat is, and here you are on your first episode of WNBA Social with me, but I'm not going to let you take the easy route. We know how this works. If you're going to pick someone to be on the team, you got to take someone off. So among those 10 players, do you have someone that stands out to you that you would take off? Because to me, it's unfortunate, but I would either take off one of the aces, being probably a Jackie Young, or I would take off, I would take off probably Brittany Griner from the starters, just because it may be a nice story having Brittany Griner start the All-Star game in her first season back, but the Phoenix Mercury are the worst team in the WNBA this season, and her coach just got fired. So is she really that deserving?
Yeah, she's probably the one I was going to say, Brittany Griner. It's just the easiest choice to make. But it doesn't take away from what Brittany's been able to accomplish coming back onto the court, and I think it's been the one bright spot for that team.
Without a doubt, because we'll talk about this in just a little bit when we get into the 2 coaches that have since departed the WNBA in the last month. But yeah, it really seems like they're struggling there in Phoenix. And to me, I think it has a lot to do with the absence of Skylar Diggins-Smith. She did just have a baby. She is on maternity leave, but she's also posting workout videos, and apparently none of the organization is even in communication with her, it seems. And we'll get to that a little bit later, and I'll tab that there, because I want to get to the All-Star reserves. As we mentioned, Alyssa Thomas from the Connecticut Sun, she most likely should have been a starter, but nevertheless, she was selected to the All-Star game. Then you also have her partner and her teammate in DeWanna Bonner, also from the Connecticut Sun, who was selected. You have EDD, Elena Delle Donne, who I just mentioned, Nafisa Collier from Minnesota, Ezzy Magmagor making her first All-Star team from Seattle, Cheyenne Parker from the Atlanta Dream, Alicia Gray, also from Atlanta. It's been a good season for the Dream so far in their rebuild campaign. You have KFC, Kalia fucking Copper from Chicago making the All-Star team. Kelsey Plum, the 4th member of the Las Vegas Aces. 2 members of the New York Liberty in their guards being Sabrina Ionescu and Courtney Vandersloot, as well as Kelsey Mitchell from the Ohio State University and the Indiana Fever. So Do any names stand out to you that may not have been deserving, or someone that should have been on the team? No, not at all. Yeah.
No, because I
That's
know the rules. I know the rules. You have to take someone off, and there's no one I am willing to take off to put someone else on. So I don't. Do you have someone in mind?
not particularly, but I will say that I was a little surprised to see Courtney Vandersloot make the team. I was a little surprised by that, just because, I mean, I'd say
If you can
that I
see my
probably,
screen, I have her numbers pulled up, and I'm like, okay, she's got 11.7 points. She's got almost 9 assists, almost 4 rebounds. It's really hard for me to talk myself out of those numbers because that's doing a lot of work for that Liberty team.
yeah, the thing that I did forget until you mentioned those numbers is the fact that since Courtney has come to town, Sabrina kind of took a step back, and she's no longer the floor general. Now Courtney has been able to take that job, and Sabrina has been able to be more of a shooting guard. Obviously, Sabrina is still going to distribute. She's still going to get her dimes in, but Courtney, deservingly so, has taken that ball and run with it. And so, you know what? I stand corrected. I was wrong. And that's why my other podcast, just to give it a shout out, my other podcast is called Stats Over Politics, because sometimes statistics just outweigh the narrative that you might have going through your head.
All right, well, I think that wraps up the All-Stars. What have you got next on your little agenda over there?
Yeah, so we were just about to talk about the Phoenix Mercury, because Vanessa Nygaard has been the first coach to be fired from the WNBA this season. It has a lot to do with the start. I think at the point when Nygaard was fired, the Mercury were at like 3-10, not very good at all. And regardless of what the record was when she got fired, they were the worst team in the WNBA. And to me, I was a little disappointed by this. Not only because I got to go cover a Phoenix Mercury game last year, and so I got to be in the press conference room and ask Vanessa a couple questions, and I thought she was just a nice person in general. And you know how sometimes we can become jaded just because we think someone's a nice person. It's like, oh, should they have lost their job? But I think back to there was maybe like 10 regular reporters who were there for every single game. I was obviously just there for the one-off. And she started asking one of the reporters who was finishing college at Arizona State. She started asking him personal questions, like about things that he was doing at Arizona State. And so I just thought that it was really nice that she took the time to invest and learn who these people were that were covering her. But regardless of any of that, the Mercury were the worst team in the WNBA this season. But the reason why I was upset by this isn't necessarily because I think that she's a nice person, but I feel like she was the scapegoat because, as was mentioned earlier, Skylar Diggins-Smith is out on maternity leave. Brittany Griner just got back into the WNBA. Yeah, she's got her feet under her now at this point. But to me, I don't feel like Vanessa Nygaard was to blame, because Skylar Diggins-Smith, that's a situation in its own. Maybe I don't know the
You gonna
full
blame
story.
DT?
Well, that's something I was going to mention, is that unfortunately Diana
There was
Taurasi,
one name I heard you did not mention, and that is a big name over there on the Phoenix Mercury.
Yeah, the thing that's really unfortunate about it, and I wanted to definitely leave this part last because I'd never want to talk down on the GOAT, but I'm going to talk about what I see. And Diana Taurasi has finally, and I don't mean finally like we've been waiting for it, like Max Kellerman predicting that Tom Brady was going to fall off a cliff, but we have finally seen Diana Taurasi start to show her age. The fact that I think she is 40, going on 41, either 39 or 40. And so she's finally showing her age, and it's disappointing because she has been inconsistent this season. And so with Diana showing her age, Brittany Griner getting back into the swing of things, and not having Skylar Diggins-Smith, along with Sophie Cunningham, was also injured early this season, I feel like Nygaard was kind of used as a scapegoat. But at the same time, the last thing I will say about that is maybe there's a lot that I don't know, that you don't know, a lot of us don't know about the inner workings of that organization. And perhaps Skylar Diggins-Smith said, I'm not coming back until she is not there, and she being Vanessa Nygaard, because I don't know, it just seemed like there was fractures towards the end of the season. Skylar Diggins-Smith, she ended up going out she was at the first game that she was out was actually the one that I was in Phoenix to cover. And then she ultimately was out for the remainder of the season, and they called it personal reasons. They said it was a non-COVID illness. Turns out she was pregnant. And I'm sure that all of the Brittany Griner stuff really just started to get to her mentally, because imagine being asked that question every single game, especially at the point where we didn't know what was going to happen with Brittany. And so I imagine how it could be taxing on the brain too. But to me, my initial reaction to this just felt like Vanessa Nygaard was the scapegoat.
I mean, yeah, probably. They've got the new owner who also has been making big changes with his NBA team. So there was going to be a short leash, probably more than likely from that. But you mentioned how nice Nygaard is. I wonder if with DT clearly needing to take a step back in terms of being like the offensive focal point, I wonder if they thought they needed to bring somebody in that was going to be more of maybe not so much a player's coach, but more we're going to run this, or it's my system type of thing to try and maximize, because Griner's having a great season. I think she's been excellent so far with what I've been able to see. I think she's deserving of the all-star spot, maybe not the starter, but I think she's played at an all-star level. And yeah, Skylar Diggins-Smith not being there, that could be a factor too, but I hate to even say scapegoat, because this is what coaches get paid for. Coaches are paid to get fired.
That's fair. Yeah, that's
unless you're Popovich.
Fair.
Or probably Becky Hammon right now.
Yeah, exactly. That is a great point. And just to set the record straight, I said 3-10 was their record when she got fired. They were actually 2-10, so even worse. And Diana Taurasi, she is now not 39, not 40. She is 41 years old, as she just celebrated her birthday on June 11th since we last recorded this podcast. And so it's kind of starting to show her age. And, you're right. Trey, I think you really hit the nail on the head, that coaches are paid as much as they are to be fired. Coaches deal with the media because of how much they get paid. And there's a lot that you take as a head coach. And so did you have one more thing you wanted to say about that?
I was just going to say, you're going to probably, unless the coach is just that established, you're going to get rid of the coach, hoping it lights a fire under the players. Like you said, they were 2-10. They've since won a game. They're only 1-2, but that 1-2 is a lot better than 2-10.
Exactly. And Mercury assistant Nikki Blue, who has been elevated to the role of interim head coach, she led the Mercury to that 85-63 win over the Indiana Fever to break a 6-game losing streak. And I saw it was a tweet from Brianna. Was it Brianna Turner, I think, that put out a tweet, and she was just like, I'm just so happy just to have one win. I never thought I'd be so happy about one win. But that is the point that the Phoenix Mercury found themselves at. And just to read the official tweet from Brianna Turner, she said, "Never been so happy for a win in my life. It's been a minute." And that's really just what they had to go through in Phoenix. And so now, just to transition a little closer to you, Trey, as Chicago, they recently lost their head coach, and it was not because they fired him. As championship winning head coach of the Chicago Sky, James Wade recently announced in the last week that he was going to depart the Sky effective immediately, and he would become an assistant coach with the Toronto Raptors. When Annie Costabile of the Chicago Sun-Times, she asked him after the fact, did you leave because you were fearing for your job security? As we know, Chicago isn't one of the best teams in the WNBA this season. He said, no, none of that. It was just to try and continue to advance my career, and it was an opportunity for me and my family. And that's ultimately why James Wade said that he decided to part Chicago. And so just in general, Trey, do you believe him when he says that, or do we think that there's a little BS that he could have been fearing for his job security? Because he wasn't only the head coach, but he was also the general manager.
I mean, maybe, but I'll take it at face value that this is the time of the time of year for the NBA teams are starting to fill out their coaching staffs, stuff like that's going on. So I'll take it at face value. For me, I'm just glad that the transition seems to be going rather seamlessly. The assistant coach, Amir Batasphere, I know I'm saying that wrong, but I watched the game
say it
last
any
night.
better.
He came in. Team didn't seem to miss a beat. Like we said, coaching change, sometimes it fires the team up. This guy seemed to play all right. And he was a championship level coach, but I mean, I don't, most coaches for me, you're either in that top 5%, that bottom 5%, or you're just like somewhere in the middle where what you do, it matters, but it's all kind of one and the same. And he was just kind of in that for me. It wasn't like losing a top tier coach.
Well, something about James Wade is he was the WNBA Coach of the Year in 2019, obviously WNBA champion in 2021. He can thank Candace Parker for that. And also, even last year, he was the WNBA Basketball Executive of the Year. So he checked all the boxes when it came to his various jobs with the Chicago Sky. And through 4 full seasons as the Chicago Sky's head coach, he finished with a 74-50 record in the regular season and 13-8 record in the playoffs. So he's a winning coach. I'm interested to see where his journey leads him to next. Do you see him potentially getting an NBA head coaching job from here? Do you think he works his way up as an assistant now in the NBA? What do you see for his future?
I mean, maybe I'd like to see that, but for me, if he could just get to be like that lead assistant, that right-hand man for someone, I think that's probably his apex. And I'd like to see him be able to find his way there. But for me, it's just, it is what it is with him. I'm not I'm not super bummed that he's no longer on the sideline.
And now we have a first-year head coach in Darko Rajakovic coming over from Memphis to be the Toronto Raptors head coach. He adds James Wade to his staff, and who knows? I honestly, to answer my own question, I honestly could see James Wade getting at least an interim opportunity in the NBA sometime within the next 5 years, especially if things didn't work out.
Do we
for Darko.
Count that as a real gig though? Because I could see that, like. But I don't know that I can see them removing that interim tag and giving him the permanent role.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it all really just depends on if that opportunity were to come up, how he would excel. And I'm not sure who the Raptors head coach will be for their summer league team, but that could be another good opportunity for James Wade. And it could be potentially why he left immediately. And obviously, the WNBA and the NBA seasons, they do overlap. So that is a key point there. I don't think the Sky are going to be making the playoffs this season, but still the WNBA season goes into September when you have NBA training camps, all those good things. And so I'm interested to see what happens with James Wade, but congratulations to him on making the leap. I mean, would you call it a leap? I guess making the leap to the NBA, going from a league of 12 teams to 30 teams. Nevertheless, James Wade is a great coach, and I think that he will do well in the NBA. And so now just wrapping things up here on episode number 2 of WNBA Social, Sean Holko alongside Trey Hill. Trey, I wanted to ask you about a couple final things. First of all, with the Las Vegas Aces and just whether or not anyone can actually beat them. But in regard to the Las Vegas Aces, they had some significant news since we last recorded, and I think it was within the last week that this happened, as the Aces signed A'ja Wilson to a 2-year contract extension, locking her up in Vegas. And to me, that just seems like a no-brainer and just something, because she's arguably the best player in the WNBA.
Yeah, and I think that keeps the core 4 locked up till 2024, right? I think is what I read. So it makes sense for all of them, that core, to kind of want to be there together. And then who knows, maybe at 2024, we're going to see everybody branch off and you'll get your dream of Jackie Young running another team. I think it's a great extension. It makes sense. And I mean, are you excited for 3 more finals appearances for the Aces?
Man, well, it depends.
I mean, honestly, I love Candace Parker, but if she's playing, I cannot see her playing at this level 2 years from now. But that team is very, very good, and they are going to stay very, very good for as long as that extension lasts.
Yeah, I could see all of them going their separate ways if they were to win like 3 straight WNBA championships. And then at that point, it's like, okay, what else is there for us to do? Exactly. What's left for them to do is Asia prove herself without a bunch of other first number one overall picks, because you look at that roster. Obviously, Asia Wilson, number one overall pick. Jackie Young, number one overall pick. Kelsey Plum, number one overall pick. Candace Parker. Candace Parker was number one overall, right? Back in like 2007, 2008, I think.
I'm going to say yes.
Okay, so there you go. And then was that 5 or was that 4? I don't know. I'm losing track. But regardless, there's a lot of number one overall picks. Okay, that's 4. Thank you very much. And so there's a lot of number one overall picks on that team, and so it'll be interesting to see. And so aside from the extension, I just want to ask point blank period. Do you not? I wouldn't phrase it as challenging the Aces, because I think that there could be some teams to challenge them. But do you see any other team than the Aces actually winning the championship this year? Because after what I just saw on Thursday between the Liberty and the Aces, I'm really starting to doubt that could happen, because the Aces just seem like they're going to steamroll everyone.
I think the lack of perimeter defense is going to hold the Liberty back from being able to have a chance. So, no, I think it's the Aces. If you give me the Aces or the field, I'm taking the Aces 100%.
Yeah, that's not a bad bet at all. And to answer my own question, I think I'm also going to go. No, I'm not also going to go. I'm gonna go with the New York Liberty. I'm going to say the New York Liberty. And those of you who know me, you may be saying that I'm biased, whatever. But I'm going to go with the New York Liberty because, number one, I picked the New York Liberty to win the championship on episode number 1 of WNBA Social. I'm sticking by my prediction until proven wrong. And also, like I said earlier, I'm just really encouraged at the ball movement and the chemistry that we saw displayed against the Storm. Obviously, the Storm, they had a shit ton of turnovers yesterday, and that's what led to a lot of transition opportunities for the Liberty and also a lesser opponent. But to me, if the Liberty can just get those opportunities against the lesser teams, work on their chemistry there, that's when you start to elevate the confidence. You start to know where players are, because you mentioned that pass from Chelsea Gray earlier, that crazy pass that she made. That's because she knew where her teammate would be because of years and years of experience. Have you seen some of the passes that Marine the Dream Johannes makes? Man, it is insane.
Oh, I'm always up for a good pass here. I think my hot take would be, if I had to pick a team that was going to challenge the Aces, it wouldn't even be the Liberty. It would be the Sun. Even without Jones, I am that big of a fan of Alyssa Thomas's game, and I think that the way she plays and just I think the way she could help break down that Las Vegas team and then just kind of break it apart from the inside maybe. But I think that's my hot take, is Alyssa Thomas would be who I would put my money on to lead her team to challenge the Aces.
I'm genuinely surprised that you said that, because of everything that we talked about earlier. I thought that you were going to say the Washington Mystics, because to me, if I had to pick a team other than the New York Liberty to win the championship this year, and obviously the Aces, because we're all just kind of assuming that the Aces repeat. But if I had to pick a team other than those two, because of the Brianna Jones injury, I can't pick the Sun anymore, even though I absolutely love the relationship on the court and off the court between Alyssa Thomas and DeWanna Bonner. I don't know if you saw it, but when DeWanna Bonner put up 41 points this season, Alyssa Thomas was like an assist away from getting another triple-double, and she stayed on the bench and said, nah, I'm good. I don't want the triple-double. This is DB's night. And I just thought that was so cool, because, yeah, they're a couple. Yeah, they're teammates. But that's just so selfless. And to me, I don't know if I would do that. I'd be like, Trey got his 41 points. Let me get my triple-double. But the fact that they have that relationship,
she's had enough triple-doubles at this point, right? Like, she's lapping people at this point.
That's a good point. I think for Alyssa Thomas, if she doesn't get a triple-double within the first 3 quarters, then it might be considered a failure for her. But yeah, I'm going to go.
I think you're right, though, with the
Mystics.
Mm-hmm. Like, now that you say it, that's the smart choice. But I love Thomas's game so much, and if I had to pick a team that I thought could get hot for, like 3 games, and that's all you need. If you can get 3 games, that's all you really need.
Yeah, and the reason why I went with the Mystics is number one, like I said, the Brianna Jones injury. Just to me, that just completely kicks them out of long-term contention, especially now that we're getting series in every single WNBA play. Like it's not just the single game elimination anymore. We are going to get series, and I feel like in series, that's when the better team prevails. And also, Shakira Austin truly just is the best complement to Elena Deladon, and she's exactly why they drafted her as high as they did in the top 3. I think she was like the number 2 overall pick when she came out, and so she really has blossomed into that perfect complement to Elena Deladon. We're finally getting to see them on the court until that New York Liberty game on June 25th, and so that was the unfortunate thing about Shakira's injury. But like you said earlier, she's probably only going to be out for another couple weeks, so if she can get back, stay healthy, then I'm probably looking at the Mystics as the biggest threat, other than the two super teams.
So as we continue to compare leagues, let's say, perfect world, the Mystics go on this magical run. How comparative is it to Dirk and that run the Mavericks went on? The big who shoots, surrounded by a great defense, taking down this team that got put. I know the Aces have already won, but just taking down this super team. I see the parallels there.
I don't know if I would necessarily go with Dirk, just because the Aces, or not the Aces, the Mystics, and also Elena Deladon, they have already won a championship, as they did back in 2019, beating Connecticut in the finals. And so they already do have the one ring. But when you mention the super team aspect of it and how it's a big taking down a super team, and
I didn't even consider the ring thing. I was more just thinking play style. Honestly, it went play style first, and then it was like, and it's even going against a super team, because I feel like EDD surrounded by that defense, it could just be like that type of run where I could see them beating, any team they go up against with a defense like that.
Natasha Cloud is a dog, and she is the one who is leading that defensive effort, and she's also shitting on politicians all over Twitter, which is pretty funny as well. And so
you're gonna have to show me this, because I'm off of Twitter, so you're gonna have to send these to me after the show.
Oh, I got you. I mean, I'll even reference one of them right now on the show. As one of them was Natasha Cloud going against Marco Rubio. And I'll save it for after, but it was just funny because like Natasha just tweeted out an opinion, right? And Marco found it. Maybe someone pointed it out to him. Someone probably runs his Twitter account, but he found it, quoted her tweet, and said basically, oh, you think that America's so shitty and you have the right to say that it is because of free speech, but it's still stupid. And then she quoted his tweet, and she was just like, yeah, you do this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, but you can say that because it's a free country or whatever. It was great. And I just love the interactions between WNBA players and politicians, because most of the time it's WNBA players dunking on the politicians. And so it's great to see. Anyways, that's pretty much all that I have for episode number 2 of WNBA Social. Any closing thoughts, Trey? I appreciate you for joining me today, man.
I got one more real quick.
All right, let's hear
it. Since we're doing the comparisons, I wasn't going to bring this to the show. I was going to save it for CSC, but since we're doing them already, I'm watching Alyssa Thomas play, and I can't figure out who she reminds me of, because she's so fucking perfect the way she plays. She is my favorite basketball player at this point, and I can't figure it out. And I realized she is who we all wanted Ben Simmons to be. If Ben Simmons could play like Alyssa Thomas, he would have been amazing. And I am so thankful for Alyssa Thomas for being everything that I want in a basketball player.
That is a comparison that I truly never thought of, because even back on draft day, when she got drafted out of Maryland back in 2014, some people were saying that she could be the female LeBron James. That's what some people were saying about her coming out of Maryland. But I really do like the Ben Simmons comparison, because LeBron is just on a whole nother level. But Ben Simmons if he just never got in his own head, then he could have continued to produce like Alyssa Thomas has been. And she's just been absolutely tearing things up. And so that's a really good comparison. Since you got me that on the spot, I might have to circle back for another player, but finish your thought, please.
Well, like my first thought was just like Draymond Green plus. Just everything Draymond does, but better. But then I was watching her in transition, and it was just it clicked for me. It was like, man, she plays the way I wanted Ben Simmons to play, and everything she does is just the right way to play basketball. That's all it really was. And I don't see the LeBron comparisons in the way she plays. I guess I can see it now because she does have the size and the playmaking. But yeah, I don't see the LeBron James comp she got when she was coming out. But man, if she's not my favorite player today.
Yeah, and she probably should have been a WNBA starter. And so I'm looking forward to the WNBA All-Star Game. I know you are as well, Trey, as it's coming up quickly on July 15th. And we might have another episode before then. We might not. I am still very inconsistent, and so I apologize for that, but I'm also honest with that. And so before we go, though, Trey, can you please tell us about all the other great podcasts that are available on the Hoop Social Media Network?
Whatever you listen to podcasts on, just search for Hoop Social Podcast. You'll find it. I've got a regular show called Charity Stripe Commentary, just me and some buddies. The real one to listen to is Hoops Temple. They've got real smart guys with Nate and Aaron, and I cannot remember the guy from New Zealand, but he's fucking fantastic too. And then on Sundays, I do a Stone Sunday show with my man Jason Coldiron, who is the editor at Hoop Social, and we do it again just on Sundays. But that's what we've got going on over there. What do you got going on, sir, before you get us out of here?
Yeah, shout out to Jason real quickly. I think I'm going to end up meeting him in person for the first time on Wednesday because I'll meet up with him at the California Classic. So I'm looking forward to that. And I got to check out more Stone Sundays. I'm sure that's extremely entertaining. Also, check out my other podcast, Stats Over Politics, as we go live every Monday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I got a little script for everyone real quickly before we get out of here. So make sure to give us a like on YouTube. It helps us really grow. And if you enjoy the show, hit subscribe to get notifications when we go live. You can follow us on Instagram and on YouTube at The Hoop Social. Follow us on TikTok at Hoop Social. You can follow me on social media at Sean_Holko. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review on all podcast platforms. If you're enjoying the show, give us 5 stars. We really appreciate it. As you have been tuned in for episode number 2 of WNBA Social, I am Sean Holko, and for my guest, Trey Hill, we're signing off. Thank you, Trey, for joining me. I appreciate it. And we'll catch you on another episode of WNBA Social here on the Hoop Social Media Network.